It is time for Becoming Gift with Andrew Reinhardt. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning from Poland, Pat, Ron, and Dave. Actually, it's evening where I'm recording this, but it's morning there when you get to listen to it. Last week, Dave invited me to go on the pilgrimage for the 15th anniversary of Annunciation Radio with Catholic Faith Journeys to Catholic Poland. Now, I in 1,000 years, I didn't think this was going to work out, but 100 small miracles happened in the last week that I was able to join this pilgrimage. So this week, I'm going to take a break from this series I've been going through, where I've been talking about the big levers to pull to grow in health and holiness. So in this pilgrimage, we're starting here in Warsaw. And for me, the highlight of these couple days in Warsaw is visiting the Divine Mercy Shrine where Saint Faustina was. Coming up in the pilgrimage, we're going to be seeing sites from the life of Saint Maximilian Kolbe and the concentration camp where both he and Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, or Edith Stein, died at Auschwitz. We're also going to be visiting the Our Lady of Czestochowa Shrine and sites from the life of Pope Saint John Paul II. So this week, I'm going to talk a little bit about Saint Faustina and the Divine Mercy image, and next week, I'm going to talk about Pope Saint John Paul II. So when I meditate on this mystery of the Divine Mercy, this beautiful devotion of the Divine Mercy chaplet that Saint Faustina gave us, this wonderful feast that's been called in its honor the Sunday after Easter by Pope St. John Paul II, and the indulgence attached with that, and all the great messages of mercy that came through St. Faustina from Jesus. I often ponder, how can God forgive us, and why does God forgive us? Sometimes, frankly, I don't feel like I should be forgiven. I don't feel like I deserve another chance. But God continues to offer his mercy. And as I pondered this, the best answer I have is that God forgives us because it's the point where his love meets our frailty. I'll say that again. God forgives us because it's the point where his love meets our frailty. I'll start with an analogy. We have two little kids at home, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And there's something about their weakness, their lack of knowledge, their fact that they're in such an early stage of their growth journey that it frankly just makes it easy to forgive them. You see them kind of bumble and fumble through life, learn by trial and error, go through so many difficulties. And frankly, they hurt you sometimes. They don't listen. They hit. Sometimes they might even bite. But these little children that the Lord has given me, there's something in my heart that just always wants to reconnect in love for them. And when I think of how I can love my children, which, believe me, is imperfect, very imperfect. But I think of how perfectly God can love me in my frailty, in my weakness, in my littleness. As humans, we are a unity of body and soul. And this body that we are is full of instincts, drives, and passions that sometimes support us in following the gospel, and sometimes they present difficulties in following the gospel. I think a lot of the elements of the church that Christ instituted are actually kind of ways that God hacks our human nature to turn our instincts toward the gospel. Let me give a couple examples. As people, we're designed to grow in love of parents, and by receiving the parents' love, to grow in the character of our parents, to become like our parents. Well, when Jesus presents himself to us, he presents God to us as Father and invites us to be his children. So God is inviting this kind of parent-child love between him and us. And by doing that, he's taking advantage of some of these basic human instincts. Another thing about us humans is that we are sort of tribal. We are meant to be in community, to be in packs, so to speak. So how does the Lord bring our faith journey to us? He brings us a faith journey in the midst of a community, in the midst of a church, in the midst of a family of faith, in the midst of a parish. So we are invited into a life of faith, a spirituality that's deeply and richly communal. And that's a big part of what the Mass is all about. But of course, it's about a lot more than that too. So in so many ways, sometimes God actually uses our instincts in a way to support us in following the gospel. But other times our instincts present difficulties to us, and these might be a lot more obvious to us. All of our desires for things that look attractive or good or tantalizing, or sometimes we feel disgust for things. Maybe we find it difficult to love people that aren't like us, or maybe that we find off-putting in some way. Right? So many times our instincts present difficulties in following the gospel. Here's a couple quotes from Saint Faustina that I find particularly inspiring. From page 1146 of her diary, says that Jesus said, "Souls that make an appeal to my mercy delight me. To such souls I grant even more graces than they ask. I cannot punish even the greatest sinner if he makes an appeal to my compassion." That's the end of the quote, but it's a powerful one. I cannot punish even the greatest sinner if he makes an appeal to my compassion. The Lord is just sitting there waiting to forgive us. The Lord's love is even more extreme than the love of a father or a mother for their child. It's something that transcends that. The love of mother and father for their children just sort of start to touch the tip of the iceberg of what God's love is like for us. And so we're invited simply to say we're sorry, to ask for God's mercy. And God delights in this. This was the whole mission of Jesus, to forgive us of our sins. Another quote from this beautiful diary from page 1578. Jesus said to Faustina, "The graces of my mercy are drawn by means of one vessel only, and that is trust. The more a soul trusts, the more it will receive." And ultimately, I think this is the core of this divine mercy teaching. We need to trust the Lord with our frailty. He understands our human nature. He understands our weakness, our brokenness, the fact that we have wounds and bad habits and all these instincts and desires that pull us all over the place. And in the midst of that, he wants to show us his love. So God bless everyone. And I look forward to joining you next week as we reflect on the life of Pope St. John Paul II on Becoming Gift.